The most basic natural shelter you can make is called a debris hut, although it's actually more of a large sleeping bag than a hut, so it is essentially a one-person shelter. Select a long, strong pole for the ridge pole. It can be supported from a tripod or simply laid against the trunk of a tree, as shown here. Next, lay sticks against the ridge pole to form the sides of the shelter. These ribbing sticks, as they are called, should not be less than a 45-degree angle to the ground. Since heat rises, make the doorway as low to the ground as possible to keep your body heat inside the shelter. Next, place a thick layer of debris, pine needles, leaves, dried grass, moss, whatever you can get a hold of, all over the outside of the shelter, and place some poles against the debris to keep the wind from blowing it away. The thicker the layer of debris, the warmer your shelter will be. Finally, stuff the inside of the shelter with the cleanest, driest debris you can find, and figure out some kind of a door, even if it's just a pile of debris.
As you can see, you will need a lot of debris. Gather up and bring in as much as you can with each load, otherwise you will spend a lot of time just walking back and forth.
Many of the other shelters that are built using natural materials are made using essentially the same construction method as the debris hut. Here is an open-faced wickiup for 3 or 4 people. It is built off of a tripod frame with poles for ribbing and then covered with debris. At the time this picture was taken, it still needs sticks against the outside to keep the debris in place, and a layer of debris inside for bedding. In cooler weather, a reflector fire could be built out in front of it, though with this type of shelter, one needs to be very careful with fire. Here is another 2 or 3 person wickiup with the reflector fire out in front. This shelter still needs poles against the outside to keep the debris in place, and a layer of debris inside for bedding.
Another option would be to build 2 to 5 of these open-faced wickiups around a central fire. Here is a closed wickiup. With the possibility of a fire inside, it is one of the snuggest, warmest shelters that can be made from natural materials in the wilderness. It is made from a tripod frame with poles for ribbing and a layer of debris against the poles. Because it was available, this particular wickiup has a layer of bark on the outside instead of poles to keep the debris in place. This provides an extra layer of weatherproofing. Here is a larger closed wickiup. Notice the rock on the left, which forms one side of the shelter. It got dark on us before we were able to gather enough debris to finish the shelter. And if I remember right, there was about 16 of us that spent the night there. One final type of constructed shelter, also known as a wickiup, we have called a brush ring. It is simply a chest-high, up to 12-foot diameter wall made from whatever is available. This size shelter is good for about 8 people. Although it isn't very weatherproof, it is relatively easy to make, and with a good debris bed around the inside of the wall and a fire inside, it can be surprisingly cozy. All of these shelters can be built without any tools, just using the construction materials themselves. And don't overlook the possibility of caves and other types of natural shelters.